Hello and welcome back to Dare Me to Prosper. This is episode 6. Today's episode is going to be a really fun one, at least I think so. I'm out of breath and I'm still sick, but I thought this would be a really fun episode to do. It is the end of the year. It's the end of 2024. And at the end of every year, if you're anything like me, you start thinking about 2025, not just in terms of maybe goals or personal plans, resolutions, which I feel like resolutions are kind of, nobody's really doing resolutions anymore. They've kind of lost their appeal. But when I am coming up on a new year, I really start getting interested in like predictions for the next year. Like what could we be facing? I don't know. It's something that really intrigues me and I have a lot of curiosity about. I think a lot of people do. So I thought it would be fun. Now, this is going to be the episode where you either are totally on board and you're all about it, or you think I'm nuts, this is not the podcast for me, and that is totally fine. I really set out with Dare Me to Prosper as the podcast, being a place that bridges the gap between people who are really just starting out on a spiritual journey and people who are maybe really deep into it, have been for a number of years, whatever. I really want to kind of bring those two worlds together. I feel like you have podcasts that are like really deep in the weeds and, you just really have to be kind of deep in that world to listen to it, or YouTube channels or whatever. Or you have, things that aren't really spiritual at all. There's not a whole lot, I feel like, that kind of bridges the gap, that is kind of bringing you in, a beginner, a 101, if you please. I really wanted this podcast to kind of be a place that is welcoming and open and aware that there's people that are maybe curious but aren't there yet. So as this is a pretty new podcast, this episode is going to kind of be a toe in the water, so to speak. Something that I already do for myself is I like to listen to or watch a lot of people who have spiritual gifts that allow them to tap into future predictions. So whether it be a psychic, whether it be a seer, whether it be a channeler, somebody who has a spiritual gift of receiving information in some way, shape, or form, and then sharing that, processing it, analyzing it, and sharing predictions. I like to follow a lot of different types of people from a lot of different walks, a lot of different gifts, and I have a note in my phone where I write down everything that somebody has said about what's upcoming, what the future might hold. I write down who they are, when they said it, where they said it, and I just like to keep track. And then it's like my own scientific method version of tracking psychics and trying to see, okay, this is what they predicted. And then I just wait and see, like, did this happen? Did it sort of happen? Did it happen slightly differently? And then that kind of helps me decide, is this somebody that I want to continue to follow or listen to? Or I find that most of it tends to be fairly accurate. Now, most of it also tends to be somewhat vague, which also just realistically, that means it's more likely that it would be accurate. But there are many people who get very specific and have been really just on the money with predictions. And so I like to keep track of that and see who I can trust. I also find it really important when I am seeking out people to listen to or to kind of follow along with, that I really seek out people, channelers, psychics, whatever, who are very neutral in terms of like their politics or their worldviews. I find that just like anything else, if you have a preference in one way or another, I think I mentioned this before, but it's the same way if like you're a pregnant woman and you're trying to predict the gender of your baby. If you have a preference, your prediction is less accurate because it's swayed by your preference. It's the same thing with psychics. If you have really strong personal beliefs, that is going to sway your ability to predict anything in the future because you really have a strong preference as to, say who might win an election or whatever. You really have to be a pretty neutral person. You have to be really mature, and you have to be able to hold enough neutrality to say, even if I did have a preference, I'm okay with whatever happens because I know that it's going to unfold the way it's supposed to unfold, or everything will be okay. You have to be able to really ride the line. So I'm very careful between who I listen to. Anybody that's super political on either side, I don't really take into consideration their predictions because I just don't believe that they'll be super accurate. So that being said, take this episode with a grain of salt. I'm not saying that any of these things are absolute truth by any means. I'm not saying that, in 2 years we're going to have this insane technology and we're all going to be walking around with aliens and we're all going to have telekinesis. Some of the stuff that I'm going to talk about in this episode is actually wild and it sounds nuts. But that being said, I want you to also consider if somebody came to you in 2019 and told you that there was going to be a worldwide pandemic and a vaccine where people would have to take it or lose their jobs, and there was going to be all these new wars that broke out, and there's going to be assassination attempts on a president, and there's going to be celebrities outed for abuse of minors, and the inflation's going to be out of control, and there's UFOs in the sky, and there's drones, and the government is having congressional hearings, blah, blah, blah. I mean, that sounds absolutely insane. And yet here we are in a world where all of those things have unfolded and much more. So it's not when things actually start to happen, I feel like it's not as crazy when it's happening in real life as it sounds when you're predicting it before it happens. Does that make sense? So let's just keep that in the back of our minds that sometimes something sounds really crazy and then it happens and you're like, wow, yeah, it is nuts, but it's less nuts now that it's actually happened and we're living it. Another disclaimer, so many disclaimers before we get started. I don't believe there's any such thing as an 100% accurate future prediction, because the future is really not 100% predictable because we are always making decisions and there is always free will. So things can always change. I believe personally that there's multiple versions of the future, and the decisions that we make as an individual and as a collective can change or sway those future timelines, if you will. Anything I say is only a prediction of the current energy as it is, as things are, if things don't change too much. I'm not going to go through and name because there's so many different people that I pulled this from, and it's kind of, when I wrote the outline for this podcast, I kind of hodgepodged it together so that I could make it somewhat chronological and easier to listen to. So I'm not going to necessarily name every single person. Because again, this is not a scientific paper. This is just for entertainment only purposes podcast of all sorts of different people that have made predictions just for fun, just to listen to, just because it's entertaining. And we'll see what happens. Some of this is also astrology based. So astrologers that have kind of predicted things by looking at the layout of the astrology energy. So it's really just a huge hodgepodge, and but there's so much overlap, which again to me gives it more credibility when a lot of these people who are not related are saying the same things. To me, that gives it makes it a little bit more credible. So without further ado, all of these, based on what I've heard, I'm giving this the timeline of kind of, let's say, the next 5 to 10 years, unless I say different. I'm saying in the next 5 to 10 years. So this is not just 2025, because again, time is so hard to nail down. Anytime somebody's ever given a prediction, the timing of things is so fluid, and it's really, really difficult to say this is going to happen in this month of this year, because it's always changing. So some of it's 2025 and some of it is beyond that. But I really think that 2025 is going to be a year where just so many things change. I think it's going to be a very poignant year energetically, where there's just a lot of chaos and things are changing and things are happening. And 2020 to 2024 has already been a lot of that. So I think we're just going to continue seeing more of that, especially these next, I would say, couple of years. So starting out, one of the first things I wanted to note is that there was one person a while back who really kind of laid out from 2020 to 2028, laid out those 8 years in 2 chunks, with 2020 to 2024 representing kind of the breakdown and the initial downfall. From 2020 to 2024, that was going to be the collapse of the old earth, so to speak, where all of these systems that we're seeing break down right now, the medical system, the financial system, the educational system, all of these systems, if you look at them individually, they really are all collapsing. They're all being kind of demolished from the inside out, right? We're all losing faith in the medical system. We just had an assassination happen. People are quitting in the medical field left and right. People are choosing not to use insurance. People are choosing not to use traditional doctors. People are choosing not to get vaccines. Not that the medical system on its own is bad or that medicine is bad, but the way that this system is set up is very corrupt, and we're seeing that collapse. The educational system, right? We're seeing teachers leave in droves. We're seeing people pull their kids out of schools in droves. The educational system is totally being flipped on its head because the old system is not working. We need a new system. Financial system. Again, banks are closing. The economy is absolutely insane. The housing system is crap. The real estate market is crap. It is all just really falling apart, and it's forcing us as a society to kind of rebuild because what was is not working. Not only that, but we're seeing the corruption. Our eyes are being opened to all of the horrific and just greedy things that are happening inside of a lot of these systems, and we're demanding change, which we should. So 2020 to 2024, the overall energy is going to be a lot of that collapse, which we've seen, right? If we look back, a lot of that has happened. And then 2024 to 2028, this person individually was saying that now we will start to see kind of we're at right now, 2024, we're at the bottom of the pit, right? We're in the valley. We're at rock bottom, so to speak. And now we're going to start to kind of get some momentum up the hill. We're going to start to kind of see a reemergence of the new earth, of these new ways of doing things, this new way of being, the new solutions coming into light. Now, we've got a long way to go. This is not going to be an overnight thing by any means. But the idea that this person was predicting was that the first 4 years were going to kind of be the breakdown, and the second 4 years we're going to kind of start to see the building back. We're still going to be in the fight during these next 4 years. We're still going to have to, fight the corruption and finish the job, but we're going to start seeing an emergence of new ideas and new ways of being. So I tried to kind of put these in a chronological order as much as I could because, again, it's so hodgepodge and a mix-up of so many different people. But here we go. One person said that some of our most challenging times would actually be December of 2024 right now and January of 2025. Now, whenever there's predictions made of most challenging times, it doesn't necessarily mean that individuals are going to have the most challenging time. It's more of a collective, the general chaos of the world is going to be really intense. There's been new school shootings, right, this month. There has been the murder of this healthcare CEO that's obviously got the world by storm, and we're all just zoned in to see what's going to happen. And it's really caused its own awakening, so to speak, of people coming together. Not that we support murder, but that we see that there's been a problem that has been happening for so long, and it was not going to change without drastic measures. And I think that's the idea that everybody's kind of rallying around is we can all relate to this idea of being taken advantage of by large corporations and things that are out of our control. And we're kind of coming together over this idea, right? It's the people against the elite. And we're going to see a lot more of that energy, I think, coming into play. I do think that will definitely be a narrative that does describe the next 4 years, 2025 and beyond. The power is one kind of, if I had to kind of generalize a lot of these predictions as well, a big theme that continues to come up to the forefront is that a lot of the power is going to be shifted back to the people. It's going to be shifted away from the powers that be, the powers that were, I would prefer to say, and it's going to be shifted back into the hands of the people, which again, I've mentioned this before, but that's also a really big thing with the age of Aquarius that we're moving into now, astrology-wise. With Pluto and Aquarius, the energy is much more supportive of people, right? Capricorn energy which is what we were in, is much more supportive of climbing the ladder, of working hard and working your way to the top, and really just a workhorse energy. Moving into Aquarius, the energy is more supportive of the collective and of serving people, serving other people. So businesses, we're going to see less people just succeeding because they're just workhorsing their way to the top. And we're going to see more people succeeding when you have a business that supports other people. If you have a business that is servant-hearted and you're genuinely trying to help people, and it's not a business like you can see in businesses like real estate, or you can see in businesses like these big corporations where it's just self-serving, you're just climbing the ladder and you really just care about, yourself or your own monetary goals. That's a very selfish energy that was supported by the energy we were in. Now moving into the age of Aquarius, it's going to be a people first energy, which means all of these other businesses that don't function in that way are not going to be supported by the overarching energy, which means they can't exist. They cannot succeed. That's why I really feel like people underestimate astrology, is because whether you like it or not, whether you believe, science is the same way. Astrology is a science, but it's like, just because you don't believe in it doesn't mean it doesn't affect you. So not believing in or not really participating in astrology doesn't really mean that it's not going to affect you in your life. So in my mind, I'm like, I would rather understand it and kind of be able to know what's coming. And so I think that's going to be a really interesting swap that we're going to see as well. Okay, so I got sidetracked. Most challenging times, December 2024, January 2025. So I think these would just be like a really poignant time. I think we're going to see a lot of change, a lot of big collective events. A lot of people predicted different people winning the election. I don't want to get too political, but I will say one prediction that came up over and over was multiple people predicted. And again, I'm very picky. I don't like to listen to people that are hardcore Republican or hardcore Democrat because I really believe that their own beliefs get in the way. But one thing that came up over and over was a lot of people had predicted seeing a politician, an old politician who has some sort of issue with their heart, pass away. This was something that came up multiple times. Some people are like, is it Trump? Is it Biden? Right? They're all so old. It's like you could see anything happening. There's been multiple assassination attempts on Trump. Could it be that? Could it be, Biden is just really old and who knows? I'm not really sure. Nobody really was able to name names, but multiple people said they foresaw a politician passing away. And basically when that happens, it kind of causes some chaos. It causes some shifting in, how things are done, some decisions that need to be made. I don't know. I could see that happening on either side. I think it'll be really interesting. I really, truly believe, and I have my own opinions and I voted, but I really, truly believe that no matter what happens, I think we'll be okay. I think it'll play out the way that it needs to play out for the highest good of humanity. And so I'm not super worried about what that looks like. I'm a little worried maybe, but I'm not. But at the end of the day, I know everything's going to be okay. So whatever that is, it's possible that when that happens, or if that happens, that it could spark things like riots, fighting, sort of like civil, not full-blown war, but civil outbreak. The U.S. could be in conflict over this. So I don't take that with a grain of salt. Again, this is why I just write it down and I like to see. Another thing that came up over and over, and I'm not a fear mongerer, because again, COVID happened, right? And a lot of people predicted, something like that happening. And it sounds so scary when somebody makes a big prediction, oh, worldwide pandemic. Like if somebody had said that to you in 2018, right? That sounds absolutely terrifying. But now that it's happened, did we all probably have some scary times? Yes. Did people die, pass away? Yes. At the end of the day, though, most people were okay. And now, it's just like any other virus that's out there. Do you want to catch it? No. But are you terrified of it and live your life in fear every day? No, not really. So again, when I say stuff like this, I just want you to keep in mind that a lot of times it's not as bad as it might sound when you're just making a blanket prediction. Okay, so there were several people that made predictions of kind of another sort of plague happening. One person said bubonic plague, I think meaning that, maybe there's something about it being spread by like rodents or bugs or something like that. And again, it doesn't mean that it's going to happen worldwide. There might be kind of like plagues in third world countries that kind of break out and the world kind of panics for a minute, but then it gets under control. You're always hearing on the news, they're always trying to throw out like, monkeypox, this disease, that disease, be scared, be scared. So take it with a grain of salt. But that was something that came up, was that we may see more kind of health issues pop up like that. That may be a similar situation to COVID. But again, I think it's something that you might see on a collective level, but not every individual is going to be impacted by that. on the upside. Now, not too many of these predictions have a timeline to go with it, but one thing that I did see come up was that several people predicted that the fall and winter of 2025 would actually be, and we would see a major improvement in our economy, in our real estate market, financial markets, so that kind of the state we're in now, which again, like I said, end of 2024, we're like rock bottom, right? We're in a lot of ways, we're like really at the bottom of the barrel, that we will see improvements, 2025, 26, 27 in our economy and in our markets. So I, again, take it with a grain of salt, but I wrote it down and I'm going to kind of watch and just see what happens. Another thing, speaking of economy, that popped up over and over was this idea. People predicted that we would see an emergence of a new financial system, primarily a crypto-based system, which is not surprising, I think, for most of us. It seems like we're kind of heading in that direction anyway, but it's not so widespread. I know the idea of a cashless society is very terrifying, I think for good reason, because it feels like cash is less corruptible than crypto is, right? Crypto, it seems like it's too easy for that to be, kind of taken away, or all of your money to disappear because you can't physically hold it in your hand. So I absolutely understand that. That being said, the information that I've heard over and over again from several people who are predicting this coming of crypto is that to embrace it, that this is the direction that we're ultimately going in, that we're kind of outgrowing technology-wise, we're kind of outgrowing this cash-based society. One person in particular said, because she kind of, this person kind of did a deep dive into the future of the financial system and what that would look like and what we should be prepared for. And what she shared was that, yes, the crypto system, we will lean towards crypto, right? They will attempt to switch us over to a crypto market, and that one of two things could happen. Dang, I'm just realizing I don't have this exact information on my notes, so I'm just going to go from memory here. But from what I remember, she said one of two things would happen is that, one, they would try to get everybody kind of on a one world currency. And that sounds bad, right? Like, oh, one world government. We've been threatened with this before. We've heard stories of this. So this does not sound like it's in our favor. They're going to try to, blah, 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 whatever. There's a lot of theories around like why that might be bad. But she said, I can't remember. I don't want to like misspeak now because I don't know why I didn't put this in my notes. But basically there was like two different ways that this could go. But she said either way, the people that want to corrupt this system, the people that ultimately want to use crypto against people, that it will fail either way. And I can't remember. It was like there was two different ways that it could go. Either it was going to be a one world way, or there was going to be another option that I can't remember. But it was like either way, no matter what happened, even if for a while or a short time period, they really used it against us, that at the end of the day, they weren't going to succeed. And so that was kind of the overarching message, was that, yeah, they may try to kind of use crypto against people or use it to gain power over people in a negative way. But at the end of the day, it just wasn't going to stay that way. It wasn't going to pan out for them. And that honestly, that's just with technology and AI, like that's the direction we need to head in, but we can trust it, not to be scared of it, basically. Another big thing that came out was, again, this is not surprising, right? This is something that's already been kind of happening, and I don't think this will surprise people, but in terms of wars in different countries, many people, many channelers, many psychics, whatever, have said they foresaw China attacking Taiwan and there being a big conflict between China and Taiwan. Again, not surprising, right? If this is like a historical pattern that we've seen. The kind of key element here, though, was that when this happens, this is going to be like a trigger for a lot of other world events, right? So it's like when this happens, it's going to kind of cause this like waterfall or snowball of other events. They also said, again, multiple people said this, which I found interesting, was that after China attacks Taiwan, that Japan would kind of rally the world against China, and we end up in somewhat of like a global World War III. Now, I don't want to say World War III like in terms of like a full out, everybody's, we don't do war now like we did war during World War II, right? It looks a little bit different. We have different technology, different weapons. Our troops work differently. but at least politically, it would stir up some involvement. Now, one person said that the U.S. really wouldn't be super involved, that we would kind of be like, oh, yeah, we're here, but we're not really getting involved, which is good. So that was a big thing that came up. Now, if you look at, kind of the news and you go online, we're already starting to see this kind of being ramped up, right? This energy of like, this could happen any day, easily this could happen any day. So again, I don't think this will be a surprise to people. But again, just something to watch out for. And it's more so what I found interesting was the order of events, right? We don't necessarily have a timeline. Like if some or all of this was to happen, we don't necessarily have a reliable time of this is going to happen this month or this year, blah, blah, blah. But the order of events, I think, would almost be more accurate. And I have also heard people say that as well. Like, oh, I can't predict this in terms of time, but I can predict the order that things will happen. So I like to kind of look at it that way as well. Like, oh, I'm going to look out for if this happens, does this happen right after? And kind of the order things are happening in. So again, just want to throw that out there. So China attacking Taiwan, Japan rallying the world against China, kind of bringing other countries into it. Someone also said that trade will struggle because of this. Again, not surprising, but trade will struggle. There will be shortages. And it's not that you wouldn't have access to things, but it's like some things you might not have as easy access to. Like Amazon is not going to be, like we might not just have instant access to all of the things we have instant access to now because trade will be struggling and we're going to have some shortages. And which is, again, why a lot of these same people have said, and you've heard, this is not just psychics, right? The whole world is saying this, to prepare, to stock some food, stock some water, have a way to clean your water that doesn't require electricity. Just have a back stock of emergency things that you want to have access to, formula, toilet paper, whatever it is, because we kind of foresee something happening that could affect trade or that could affect resources, right? So again, not super surprising. One of the other things with Japan specifically was that, again, somewhere around the same time or within a year, that Japan specifically would have a very large natural disaster. I was picking up on a consistent storyline of like volcanoes, earthquakes, tsunamis, kind of a ripple effect of like, oh, there's an earthquake and then a tsunami, or a volcano and then a tsunami, or something like that, that is big enough that it could impact other countries as well. Tsunamis and flooding were a really big prediction that came up in terms of natural disasters worldwide. Indonesia was also another country that came up. I know that they've got some volcanoes that are apparently like being watched. And that I think is another big one that, like, if Indonesia had a big volcano eruption, that could trigger some tsunamis that could be really devastating. So again, may not affect everybody everywhere, but it could affect multiple countries. It would still be a really big deal. Another thing, not to backtrack, but in terms of war, I thought this was really interesting. Somebody specifically predicted that the Ukraine war wouldn't end until the death of their leader. I'm kind of nervous to say something. I'm like, I don't want to get flagged for anything. I don't know. Until the death of a certain leader of a certain very large country that starts with an R, and that leader would actually be followed by a female leader, which I thought that was really interesting. And that's a very specific prediction too. So I'd be really interested to see kind of what might happen there. But at the end of the day, Russia would end up taking some of Ukraine. Again, I think that's somewhat not a huge surprise if that were to happen. Not that I'm encouraging any of this. I'm just saying I think we would not be surprised historically if we saw that happen. So that was a prediction. And again, during all of this, I think a lot of this could also be happening at the same time. So it's not like one necessarily after the other. It could be a lot of overlap, like this is still happening and then this thing happened. So it could be natural disasters and wars happening at the same time, as we're already seeing, right? So again, supply chains will be strained during this time. So we're going to see a lot more of that, where just trade, supplies, shortages, a lot of that, again, not surprising when all this other stuff is going on, which ultimately forces the U.S. into more local markets. Basically, like, we're not going to have access to as much as we're used to having access to, which will force us to shop more locally, to support more locally. We'll be kind of forced into these smaller communities, was, again, something that I heard over and over and over and over again. So I definitely think these are things that if they were to happen, I think we would see them within the next 3 years. I mean, I would say that those things are already really starting to happen. So I wouldn't be surprised if they happened pretty soon, in the next year, if not 3 years. The next kind of big section of things that, again, if you are like me and you're really pay attention to a lot of the things that are predicted, or kind of in the spiritual world, things that people talk about a lot. Another thing that really comes up a lot is this idea of solar flares or a big solar event. People have been talking about this for years and years and years. They continue to talk about it. Again, this is something that's not surprising, right? We're seeing a lot of radiation and solar energy coming from the sun in the last, 5 to 10 years, but it just has gotten more and more and more intense every single year. We're seeing the poles starting to shift, which again, that causes natural disasters. So it's not surprising that we're seeing a lot of this stuff. So we're already seeing a lot of solar flares come off of the sun and have been seeing that often. The big thing that people have predicted over and over, and you hear a lot of people talking about this, is this idea of one really large solar flare. Now, if we got a solar flare, it doesn't have to be from the sun. I mean, stars are also, our sun is a star. So it could happen from other stars. It could happen from, I've heard people talk about the Betelgeuse star. Like there could be multiple sources of a solar flare. So there's multiple places where this could come from. But if we were to get a solar flare big enough, the basic understanding is that there is a potential for it to wipe out our grid, to wipe out our satellites, to knock the power from essentially the entire planet, if it were large enough. And so this is kind of why there's a lot of buzz around that idea, is that would obviously be a very scary event. It would have a big impact on our physical bodies. It would really kind of devastate the earth if we were to just all lose power, even for a few days. Think about hospitals, think about, things like that. It would be detrimental. And so it is a scary idea. Now, I've also heard people say, well, there's timelines where we don't have to get just one big solar flare. We could just get a bunch of smaller ones and kind of end up in the same place. And so there's different future possibilities, ways that this could play out, which I think is totally plausible. But again, I just think it's really interesting. This is one that comes up over and over and over again. And so again, they've been saying this for a long time. So will it happen or not? I don't know. I do tend to pay more attention to things that are predicted by multiple people over and over and over again, though, just statistically. So if that did happen and it did wipe out the grid, that is where we get this idea. There's been a lot of people predicting this idea of 3 days of darkness, right? Meaning that if the grid goes down and we're in the dark, none of our power is working, that's when you're going to want that stock of food. That's when you're going to want emergency items or whatever, you need. We saw what happened in places like Asheville, like God forbid, not just the initial emergency with the water that killed people, but then the after effects, the not having power for days on end. People didn't have access to things. They still don't in some places. That effect is just as deadly as the initial natural disaster if people don't have access to simple things like food and water and clothing and shelter, right? So again, that's where this idea comes, where it's like, you want to have a backstock, you want to have a plan, you want to have some walkie-talkies, something, just as much as you can, even if it's just you buy an extra can of food at the store every time you go. It's always a good idea just to have some just in case stock food. You can't go wrong. As far as timelines, I have heard that this, could be anywhere from 2025 to like 2032 or something. There's really who freaking knows? If it even is going to happen, I think it would probably happen in the next 5 years is what I would guess based on listening to people over and over and over again. Now, again, speaking of ripple effects and kind of snowball effects, this would be another thing where if that were to happen, there would be more effects that come from that. There would be effects on, our physical bodies and on the earth. So we could see way more natural disasters if we did receive an impact of solar energy like that. We could see more earthquakes or more volcanoes and more tsunamis or hurricanes or whatever it is. We could see more of that after a big event like a solar flare. So that would be really, I mean, it would be kind of scary. It would be a big deal. And again, I don't think it would mean that everybody everywhere is experiencing that, but there would definitely be some impact, some really hard hitting impacts to some places. Now, speaking of that, again, I don't think we'll see this all in like the span of a week. I think it'll kind of be drawn out over time, but something that I find really interesting, I'll see if I can link this in the show notes, but there is a map that has been going around. It's called the future map of Earth, or the future map of North America. I think they break it into different countries. And I think there's a couple. I know Edgar Cayce, I think, has a specific map. And then there's somebody else that came out with a map. I can't remember his name. But they're very similar maps. And these maps of supposed maps of the future, one of them, I think the Edgar Cayce one, it was predicted like way early 1900s. So long time ago, he had these psychic predictions of what the planet was going to look like and how all the continents were going to kind of shift and change due to flooding. Basically, due to rising water levels, we were going to see a lot of land and huge parts, if not complete countries, go underwater, which would change the complete layout of our world. And then other areas that would kind of appear, like come out of water. So basically, these water levels shifting and changing all over the world. Again, this was predicted a really long time ago. Really interesting. Then what really sparked kind of my mind to look at it again was this guy. I really got into listening to NDEs, so like people who had near-death experiences, which I find so fascinating because hundreds of thousands of people have these experiences and they quote unquote die, or actually die without the quotes, right? And they have these visions or these experiences, and then they come back, and so many of those experiences and things that they say and things that they learn are very, very similar, if not identical to one another. And so I started to see that pattern. I started researching it, and I just found it really interesting. One guy, I was listening to his story about how he died and what he experienced and coming back. He came back and, claimed to have this knowledge of what was going to happen on Earth. So this is one of the people that I just listened to. And a lot of the stuff that he said aligned with other people. And again, take it with a grain of salt. If you listen to people like this, you do really have to use your own discernment to say, I've certainly listened to people. I just want to throw this out there. I have definitely listened to people where they have made some really cool predictions. And I'm like, I just don't believe you. I get a weird vibe from this person. Some things that you say just kind of put a red flag in my mind. To each their own, right? But I just want to say I don't necessarily believe every single thing I hear. However, and I've been wrong. I think I've believed some people, and then later we're like, you know what, that was totally wrong. I don't believe you. I'm gonna not listen to that person anymore. But I think that's okay, right? That's part of learning and growing. I would rather be a person that sometimes believed something wrong and then was able to admit that I was wrong about it later than never think outside the box and just believe everything that a quote unquote credible source tells me, right? I would rather be wrong. I would rather believe something totally wild and then later be able to admit that I was wrong than say watch the news all day and say I believe everything that you tell me, and I'm going to make the news my number one, source of truth and never question that. I would rather be wrong sometimes and have an open mind is what I'm saying. So take that how you will. But this guy had said he was talking about the water levels and tsunamis, and he described specifically in the U.S., he described how there would be, after all of these natural disasters and this chaos happened, he described what he called an inland ocean that went from the Great Lakes in Michigan down to the Gulf of Mexico. And I thought that's so interesting because that when he said that, I was like, wait, I've seen a map that has that on it. And I went and I looked up these, I believe it was the Edgar Cayce maps, don't quote me, but one of these maps of the future, right, that were done in the early 1900s. And I was like, that's exactly what is on that map, is that really basically like a really skinny ocean or an insanely wide river, right, that goes from the Gulf of Mexico to the Great Lakes, kind of like through those states, which means a lot of that land right there ends up being underwater. So I thought that was really interesting. So again, I will post that in the show notes if you want to take a look yourself. But again, a lot of stuff like that where there's a lot of overlap between different people who say different things. So I do think, the downside to this is I do think there is going to be a lot of change in the next 10 years where, there's going to be things like natural disasters or different things like that where we do kind of we take a hit to the population, which I did. One person said specifically that not to panic about this idea of the population decreasing, because we are kind of at max capacity on Earth in terms of resources and things like that. Now, does that mean that people need to die? No. but that it's okay if, say, less babies are being born. I know there's a lot of people panicking about that. And I do think we will see in our lifetime some countries that really, I don't want to say diminish, but really, really kind of fizzle out in terms of population, like China. Not that they'll fizzle out completely, but, they're replenishing their, what do you call it? The rate at which they are repopulating has slowed down so much because they put that one-child cap on it, that their population is shrinking so fast. And then you just see a lot of people these days just don't want to have children or choosing not to have children, which is totally fine. But I think we're going to see in our lifetime that the population of the planet is going to significantly decrease due to just natural causes, like people not having kids, natural disasters maybe, or just things like that. That was another thing that came up over and over, was that the population is going to kind of shrink down a bit, but that it won't be, I don't want to be a fearmonger. I don't think it'll be as scary as it sounds when you're like, oh, billions of people are going to die. Not necessarily. People are going to die naturally. Less babies are going to be born. There's going to be some natural disasters. But overall, we're not going to have a baby boom like we used to, right? We're going to have less babies being born. All right, so I got a little off track there, but just to come back to this idea of kind of the U.S. and what we will be seeing here, if you're a U.S. listener or maybe Canada or somewhere nearby, the overarching message was that there wasn't too much craziness in terms of the U.S. as a whole, but one thing that did come up was due to, these other countries engaging in wars and conflict within our own political system, that we were going to see a little bit of lack of resources to have some stuff stocked. You don't have to have months and months and months of food stocked. It's not going to be, I don't believe at least, that it will be like this apocalyptic situation where you're never going to have access to food again. I think you will need some food and some water just to feel safe and secure for your family. That's my personal belief. I have no idea what kind of timeline this would be, but one thing that almost every single person that I've ever heard say something about the future of the U.S. specifically said that we will be at some point, whether it's now or in 10 years, we will be getting back to smaller communities. We will be getting back to a more homestead type lifestyle. Not that everybody has to have like cows and chickens and 5 acres of land or more, but that we will all be kind of forced to become a little bit more self-sufficient, specifically locally. Like, we don't necessarily have to be self-sufficient on our own, but we're going to be self-sufficient locally. We're going to turn back to our local markets, our local farmers. We're going to be more decentralized and not so consumer-based, because one of the things that came out of all of this turmoil politically was that a lot of people said the states were going to actually break apart, that the U.S. would either break into sections, like just two countries maybe, instead of one, or we would just take the states and we would just completely separate into each state becomes, sort of like Europe. And due to that, we would, again, each state would kind of become localized and be more dependent on itself rather than all of this shipping and trading from other states or other countries. That we would, in the future, kind of go back to actually more of a village type community, but with technology. So we'd have the benefits of technology while being in a more localized market, which I do think is a much healthier way to live, where you are not so stretched out, which I do think is a healthier way to live ultimately. Oh, okay, wait. I just found the notes where she was talking about the two different timelines for a digital currency. This is what it was. So she was saying there was two major timelines for digital currency. Both included going through the initial process of becoming a one world currency. So at some point, she said, we will see the entire world come to one type of digital currency, which sounds really scary because, again, it sounds like a very corruptible system, right? It sounds like losing a lot of our own autonomy. It sounds very scary. But this is what she said. She said, one timeline, one option is that system would just be a complete failure. Like, it just wouldn't take. We try to get everybody on a one world currency and it just it doesn't work. And we end up having to start over and do something else. The other timeline is that there'd be a gradual change of hands where we might start out on a one world currency, but that gradually that will change hands. And so what was meant for harm will ultimately transition into a positive timeline, a positive option. So that's what she was saying. So yes, we might end up on a one world currency and we're all panicking and freaked out because that sounds awful. And we know too much about our governments to know, we know that we don't trust them with a one world currency, right? She was saying either way, that'll just be kind of a transition period. We might for a short time be on a one world currency, but we will eventually kind of transition into something else that is not going to ultimately be for harm. So I thought that was really interesting. God, I'm almost an hour in. I haven't even talked about aliens. I don't want to harp too much on that, but one thing I do have written down is that somewhere around 2026 or 2027 that there would be a very large scale open contact event, like meaning there's going to be some sort of alien event or sighting that would be so big and so disruptive, so to speak, that nobody could deny. It's not going to be like one person sees a UFO in their car and they video it and nobody else believes them. It's going to be something that's so big that people will no longer be able to deny the existence of extraterrestrials. And it'll be something that kind of takes the world by storm. So that is one that I have written down. So I think that's something that we'll see in the next few years. Personally, I believe we'll see it because we're already seeing it, right? We've already seen a huge uptick in UFOs and sightings and people having just one-on-one experiences with some type of encounter that is really turning people on to this idea that we are not alone in the universe. There is intelligent life outside of Earth. At some point, we're going to have to start accepting that and interacting with these other beings. Like we're getting to that point where I don't think we're going to be alone here anymore. I think there is a future where humans and extraterrestrials interact on a regular basis. And I know that sounds so Star Trek. I get it. I think it's going to happen. Just my personal opinion. So that's kind of really the overarching stuff, right? It's a lot of natural disasters. We're going to see, I think, some war. We're going to see some issues with trade. We're going to need to stock some food. I think, though, that 2025 is going to kind of be the year where it's like the last hurrah in terms of like chaos and the bad stuff. Like I think 2025 is the year where it's like we're really like detoxing out the last of the crap. And that's going to get a little bit feisty and it's going to get a little bit scary. But I think this is, again, my personal opinion from all the information that I've kind of looked at and taken in, that this is going to be kind of the launch that sends us into a better decade. So I think we're going to see more exposing of the corruption in our government, more exposing of celebrities and just people at the top that are involved in these horrific things. I think we're going to see more of that coming out. I think we're going to see continuing the systems change. Like I said, financial systems changing. I think we're going to see a change in our government. I would not be surprised if in the next 10 years our complete government system totally gets reworked. I know that's a big deal, but I could see it happening. I think all of our systems are kind of collapsing from the inside out, and I could see really big changes happening. I think our educational system, again, is going to see change. I think all of our systems are going to slowly kind of start changing and transforming into something that serves the collective better. I think we're going to continue to see huge advancements in AI. I think AI is coming whether we like it or not. It's going to continue to advance. I think we're going to see some insane, just overall technological advancements. And I think that'll be tricky because I think there is definitely still enough corruption in place where some of that could be attempted to work against us. But I think we're kind of in an era now where we're moving into, again, an energy where the collective will be supported. The energy of helping people will be supported. And so I think we're going to see a lot of this corruption weeded out. So I don't think we have to be scared of the technology. I think ultimately it will be for our good. Oh, and I don't have any specific predictions around this, but I also think we're going to see major advancement in healthcare and health. I know I've seen a lot of just things floating around social media, like new technology for spotting sicknesses and diseases before they happen, different like sound wave technology for healing, just all this crazy advanced technology around being able to heal people without medicine and without intervention necessarily with anything except basically energetic healing is what I would boil it down to. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that. I think it's just going to be a wild next year, next 4 years. This episode ended up being longer than I thought it was going to be. And I hope I kind of was able to make it not too scatterbrained because it is kind of all over the place. But I just thought this would be a fun episode. So I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you find this as interesting as I do. Again, all of this is just for entertainment purpose. None of it is necessarily absolutely true, but I think it is helpful to kind of maybe have a heads up as to what could be coming or things to watch out for, things to prepare for. Don't forget to give Dare Me to Prosper a 5-star review if you have enjoyed listening to the podcast. It's, just a baby podcast, so it really helps it out when you review it, and I would really appreciate it. You can always email me at daremetoprosper@gmail.com if you have any questions or requests for the podcast. So thank you so much for listening, and I will see you guys next time on Dare Me to Prosper.